The thunder outside was nothing compared to the storm in her heart. She collapsed against the stranger's door, her voice a raw whisper. "Please, can I hide in your house?" She was running from a man she knew, completely unaware she'd just run to a man the entire city feared. Xiaomi despised the rain. It was messy, unpredictable, and loud. 3 things he had ruthlessly eliminated from his life. His minimalist penthouse, all glass and polished steel overlooking the city, was his fortress of absolute control. At 35, he was Xiaomi Zhang, a name whispered with a mix of reverence and terror. To the public, he was a phantom investor. To the underworld, he was the head of the Golden Serpent Triad. He had just ended a call, his voice never rising above a calm monotone as he'd ordered a man's ruin. Now he stood watching the storm, swirling a glass of obscenely expensive whiskey, feeling nothing but a familiar, hollow ache of boredom. The silence of his home was usually his sanctuary. Tonight, it felt like a tomb. Miles below and a world away, Ella was living the storm. The rain was a violent accomplice to the man she was fleeing. It plastered her thin dress to her skin, and the cold was so deep it felt like it was in her bones. But it was nothing compared to the ice-cold terror gripping her heart. He'd found her again. He'd promised that this time, he'd kill her. And she believed him. She'd run until her lungs burned, and her feet were bloody inside her cheap heels, which she'd kicked off blocks ago. She stumbled into an exclusive, gated neighborhood, the kind of place she only ever saw in magazines. She was a ghost in their perfect world, and she knew she didn't belong. A car engine revved behind her, the distinct throaty roar of his car. A sob tore from her throat. She was trapped. Desperate, she veered off the street and bolted up the stone steps of the nearest house. It was dark, imposing, and silent. She didn't think. She just reacted, pounding on the massive oak door with all the strength she had left, her knuckles scraping raw. The door glided open. He stood there, silhouetted against the warm light, looking like a god carved from marble. He was tall, wearing a silk robe, holding a glass of amber liquid. His eyes, dark and utterly unreadable, raked over her. Ella's carefully rehearsed plea died in her throat. This man, he wasn't just rich, he was dangerous. But the car was turning the corner. She had no choice. "Please," she gasped, the word ripped from her soul. "Please, can I hide in your house?" Have you ever been so desperate you'd trust a total stranger? What do you think she saw in his eyes in that first moment? Xiaomi's eyes didn't soften. They assessed. He was a man who processed the world in threats and assets, and the woman crumpled on his doorstep was a liability. He saw the ugly, fading bruise on her cheekbone, barely visible in the storm's chaos. He saw the raw terror in her eyes, which was genuine, and the desperation, which was inconvenient. He despised inconvenience. "Please," she sobbed again, her voice breaking. He's going to kill me." The words hung in the air, a messy, pathetic plea that stained the sterile perfection of his evening. The smart move, the clean move, was to shut the door. Then, headlights washed over them, sweeping across Ella's face and illuminating her terror in stark, cinematic relief. A black Dodge Charger skidded to a halt just past his gates. "He's here!" Ella shrieked, a sound that grated on his perfectly tuned nerves. Xiaomi's expression remained a mask of stone. His eyes flicked from the car to the woman. She wasn't just a problem. She was a problem that had just brought other problems to his doorstep. He made a decision in the space of a heartbeat. He didn't say, "Get in." He didn't offer comfort. He simply put one large hand on her upper arm. His touch wasn't gentle. It was a brand, a sudden, possessive heat that shocked her through her drenched clothes. He didn't guide her. He pulled her, yanking her from the storm into the marble foyer as if she weighed nothing. The heavy oak door snicked shut, the sound as final and absolute as a vault closing. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by her frantic, gasping breaths and the muffled roar of the man outside. "Don't touch anything," he commanded. His voice was a low vibration, an order that brooked no argument. A second later, furious pounding rattled the reinforced door. "Ella, I see you, you stupid bitch! Get out here!" Ella flinched violently, a small, animal sound escaping her. She pressed herself against the cold marble wall, trying to make herself invisible, water pooling at her bare feet. Zami didn't even look at her. He walked past her, his silk robe whispering, and peered through a small, reinforced peephole. He watched the man on his steps, big, thuggish, radiating an impotent rage. He turned back to Ella. She was a disaster, dripping rainwater onto his priceless Persian rug. "You brought this? To them? To my home?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know where else." The pounding again, harder. "Ella, I'll break this fucking door down!" Zami let out a long, slow sigh of pure annoyance. He walked back to the door. Ella's eyes widened in panic. "What are you doing? No! Please don't. He'll hurt you. He has a..." A small, cold, utterly terrifying smile just barely touched Zami's lips. "Hurt me?" He undid the deadbolt and opened the door. The man on the doorstep was exactly what Zami had expected. Big, brutish, and reeking of cheap whiskey and desperation. He was used to dealing with men like this. They were the clumsy, predictable pawns in his world. "Who the hell are you?" The man, let's call him Damon, sneered, trying to peer past Zami to find Ella. He puffed out his chest, a pathetic attempt at intimidation. "Her rich new boyfriend? Give her to me, she's my property." Zami didn't move, he didn't even blink. He just let the silence stretch, his cold gaze pinning Damon in place. The rain dripped off the stone awning, the only sound for a long, heavy moment. "Property," Zami repeated, his voice a silken, dangerous whisper. He found the word distasteful. "Yeah, property. So get out of my way before you what?" Zami interrupted, taking one single, deliberate step forward. He was physically smaller than Damon, yet he suddenly seemed to take up all the air on the porch. Damon Kyle, 34, unemployed, 2 arrests for aggravated assault, a restraining order you've violated 6 times now. You owe $10,000 to a bookie in Southside who is very unforgiving. Damon's face went from puce to a sickly mottled white. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. How do you... "You have 10 seconds, Zami said, his voice as flat and final as a eulogy, "to get off my property. After that, I will no longer be able to guarantee your safety." He smiled, the same terrifying, empty smile from before. "And unlike you, I own the police." Damon didn't need 10 seconds. He didn't even say a word. He just stumbled backward, his bravado shattering like glass. He scrambled into his car, fumbling with the keys, and peeled out, his tires screaming in the wet. Zami watched him go, his expression one of profound boredom. He closed the door, the snick of the deadbolt echoing in the vast foyer. He turned back to Ella. She was still pressed against the wall, her knuckles white, her body shaking so violently her teeth were chattering. He had just saved her, but her terror had only intensified. She was looking at him now as if he were the monster. "He's gone," Zami said, his voice returning to its normal, cold register. He pulled a silk handkerchief from his robe pocket and fastidiously wiped his hands as if he'd just touched something unclean. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're a mess," he stated, ignoring her question. He looked at the puddle of water and street grime forming at her feet. "This is a Kerman rug. It's worth more than your entire life." Ella flinched as if he'd struck her. This was her fault. All of it. She had to get out. She took a step toward the door. "I'm sorry, I'll go." "Go where?" he scoffed. "Back to him? He'll be back." "I don't know. Anywhere. I can't stay here." She resisted the pull of safety because this place, this man, felt like a different kind of trap. A colder, deeper one. "You can't," he agreed. "I have a meeting. This entire situation is an irritation." He wanted her gone. He needed his order back. But as she reached for the doorknob, her hand shaking, a wave of such utter desolation washed over her face that it gave him pause. He was resisting this complication, this mess, but the image of her, broken and terrified, triggered something he'd long since buried. "Wait," he commanded. "You're not leaving, not yet." Xiaomi sighed again, a sound of profound exasperation. He looked at the trembling woman, then at his platinum-faced watch. His meeting was in an hour. He couldn't have her here. But, as he'd just proven to the brute outside, he was a man of particulars. He knew Damon would be circling, waiting. Letting her walk out was the same as throwing her to the wolves. And a wolf, once it had a taste, often came back for the hand that fed it. She was, for now, his problem. "You're a complication," he stated, as if discussing a flawed business deal, "and I handle complications by containing them." He turned and walked, not looking back, assuming she would follow. Ella, caught between the monster she knew and the one she didn't, hesitated for only a second before scrambling after him, her bare feet silent on the cold marble. She had no other choice. He led her through a house that felt less like a home and more like an art museum. It was vast, silent, and cold. There were no pictures, no clutter, no life. Just priceless vases on pedestals and polished surfaces that reflected her own terrified, dripping image back at her. He didn't speak. The only sound was the whisper of his robe and her own ragged breathing. He took her to a wing of the house she didn't even know existed, stopping at a heavy, dark wood door. He opened it, revealing a bedroom. By his standards, it was simple. By hers, it was the most luxurious room she'd ever seen. The bed was massive, piled with thick white duvets. "You will stay here," he ordered, his voice clipped. "There is a bathroom through that door. The clothes in the closet will not fit you, but they are dry. Do not leave this room. Do not touch anything else. Do you understand?" Ella could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, will be here in the morning. We will resolve your situation then." He made it sound like he was scheduling an extermination. He started to close the door, but paused, his hand on the knob. His dark eyes met hers, and for the first time, his cold mask flickered. He wasn't just irritated. He was disturbed. This messy, terrified woman had breached his fortress, and her raw, unfiltered emotion was a language he'd forgotten how to speak. "Who are you?" she finally managed to whisper again, the question full of fear. Xiaomi's gaze hardened. "I'm the man who just saved your life. Right now, that's all you need to know." He shut the door, and she heard the unmistakable sound of a lock clicking into place. She was safe. She was a prisoner. The morning light cut a sharp, sterile line across the room. Ella was huddled in the center of the massive bed, wearing a dark gray cashmere robe she'd found in the closet. It was laughably large, engulfing her, but it was the first time she'd felt truly warm in months. She had showered, the scalding water washing away the street, but not the terror. She was a prisoner, yes, but for the first time in 2 years she had slept. Deeply. Safely. The lock clicked. Xiaomi entered, not with Mrs. Chen, but alone. He was dressed in an impeccable black suit that seemed to absorb the light in the room. He carried a simple tray, green tea, a bowl of congee, and a small, perfect pear. He set it on the bedside table, his movements precise, economical. "Eat," he commanded, his voice as flat as it had been the night before. Ella stared at the food. It was more than an offering, it was a statement. He hadn't just forgotten her. "Why?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Why what?" He seemed impatient, standing by the window, his back mostly to her. "Why are you doing this? You saved me. You could have just let me go this morning. Why the food? Why this?" She gestured to the room. Xiaomi was silent for a long moment, watching the city below. "He would have been waiting for you," he said, as if stating the most obvious fact in the world. "I do not allow loose ends." "So I'm a loose end," she said, her voice dropping. It wasn't an accusation, just a confirmation of her place in his world. "You are..." He paused, searching for the word, and his inability to find it was the most human thing she'd seen from him. "You are in my house." She picked up the spoon. Her hands were still shaking, but less. "You knew his name. You knew everything about him. The police? They never believed me. They said it was a domestic dispute. They told me to go home, to try and work it out." He finally turned to look at her. His dark eyes were unreadable, but they were focused on her, really focused. "They're fools," he said simply. "They see what they're told to see. I see what is." A single tear rolled down Ella's cheek. She wiped it away angrily. "No one has ever believed me. Not really, but you saw him for 2 minutes, and you knew." Zami felt an unfamiliar, uncomfortable sensation in his chest. It was a resonance. He, too, moved through a world where everyone was blind. She wasn't just grateful for the safety. She was grateful for the validation. He had seen her truth. He pulled a small chair from the corner, and in a move that seemed to surprise even himself, he sat. "He will not find you again, Ella." He used her name, and in that moment, the bond was formed. A fragile, terrifying thing, built not on kindness, but on a shared, harsh understanding of the world. He seems to be protecting her, but he's also so cold. Do you think someone can be both dangerous and a savior at the same time? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. The fragile peace held for another day. Zami brought her meals. They spoke little, but the silence was no longer hostile. It was watchful. Ella started to feel less like a prisoner and more like a guest. A very strange, terrified guest. The aha moment was intoxicating. He was the first person to ever make her feel truly safe. But safety bred curiosity. And curiosity in this house was a poison. She was tired of the beautiful, sterile room. She just wanted to walk, to feel her own legs under her. She told herself she was just going to get a glass of water. She slipped out of the room, her bare feet soundless on the plush runners of the hallway. The house was tomb silent. She followed the only sound, a low murmur, toward a vast, dark-paneled study. The door was cracked open just an inch. She saw him inside, not on the phone, but speaking to 2 men. They were dressed in the same impeccable black suits as Zami, their faces hard and deferential. "And the car?" Zami asked, his back to her as he looked out the window. "Taken care of, sir," one of the men replied. "The car is at the bottom of the quarry. He was still inside it." Ella's blood turned to ice. He was still inside it. "Good," Zami said. "His debts are settled. Send a condolence package to his bookie. Let them know who owns this city's debts now." "And the girl, sir?" the other man asked. Ella stopped breathing. Zami was silent for a long, terrible moment. "The girl is a complication that is being managed." A complication. Not a person. A problem. A loose end. Ella let out a sound, a tiny, strangled gasp. It was barely audible, but in the echoing silence of that house, it was a gunshot. The 2 men spun, their hands instantly inside their jackets. Zami turned, his face not changing, but his eyes. His eyes went dead. They were the eyes of a shark, ancient and cold. "Ella," he said, and the single word was a death knell. You killed him," she whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. The tray she was still holding from breakfast crashed to the floor, the porcelain shattering. You said you'd scare him. You said he'd disappear. You murdered him." She wasn't just afraid. She was horrified. The man who had gently explained the Kerman rug, the man who had brought her Kanji, was a cold-blooded killer. The safety he'd given her was a lie, bought with the blood of the man she'd fled. He wasn't a savior. He was just a more efficient monster. You're a monster!" she screamed, the word tearing from her throat, raw and full of betrayal. The word slammed into Zami harder than a bullet. Monster. The word his father had used, the word his enemies whispered, the word he saw in the mirror every goddamn morning. But hearing it from her, from this one messy, broken thing that he had, protected, it broke something. The fragile, unfamiliar warmth in his chest was instantly extinguished, replaced by a familiar, freezing rage. His mask of perfect control slammed back into place. "Get out," he commanded, his voice a lethal whisper. "What?" "He's gone. You're safe," he said, his voice as cold as the quarry water he'd just mentioned. "My promise is fulfilled. Get out of my house." He wasn't just throwing her out, he was erasing her, and in that moment, Ella was more alone than she had ever been, trapped between the man who was just murdered and the man who had ordered it. The rain had started again, a miserable, cold drizzle. Ella found herself back on the streets, but this time, the city felt different. It was no longer just a place of random dangers, it was a hunting ground, and she knew the apex predator. He had cast her out. She was wandering aimlessly, her soaking wet cashmere robe, a cruel, luxurious reminder of his world, hidden under her own flimsy, damp jacket from the night before. She was just another lost soul, shivering in a bus shelter with nowhere to go. Damon was gone. But Xiaomi, the man who had ordered his death with the same emotion as ordering dinner, was everywhere. He was the city. She was free. She had never been more terrified. The safety she'd felt in his house had been a lie, a beautiful, warm cage built by a killer. But he had saved her. He had listened to her. He had been the only person to see her truth. Her mind was a battlefield. Was it better to be hunted by a crude brute like Damon, or protected by a refined monster like Xiaomi? Now she had neither. She was just alone. Back in the penthouse, the silence was suffocating. Xiaomi stood in the exact same spot, but the room felt wrong. The two men had gone. The shattered porcelain from the tray was still on the floor, a messy, emotional stain on his perfect world. He bent down, his knees cracking, and picked up a single, sharp white fragment. He stared at it. Monster. Her voice, not his father's. Hers. Full of betrayal. He had done what he always did. He had identified a threat. Damon neutralized it permanently and secured his environment, his home. He had removed the complication. Ella. His world was back in order. Everything was clean. So why did he feel like he was choking? This hollow ache, it was worse than the boredom. It was loss. He had offered her safety, and when she saw the price of it, she had chosen the storm over him. She had chosen anything over him. He, Zhao Mijang, who had built an empire from nothing, who could buy or kill anyone he wanted, had been rejected. Not as a boss, not as an enemy, but as a man. He looked at the piece of porcelain in his hand. He could let her go. Let her be another ghost in the city. It was the smart move. The clean move. He closed his fist, the sharp edge digging into his palm, drawing a single drop of blood. He walked to his desk, pressed a button on his intercom, and his voice was granite. Find her. His head of security's voice was tinny. Sir? The girl, Ella. Find her. I want eyes on her now. And I want her safe. From everyone, including the rain. He looked at the blood on his hand. Then bring her back. He wasn't choosing vulnerability, not yet. He was choosing possession. But for Xiaomi, it was the closest he'd ever come to choosing connection. He found her exactly where he'd let her go, a ghost in a bus shelter, shivering in his absurdly expensive cashmere robe. The black Maybach glided to a silent stop in front of her, a predator in the rain. This time, Xiaomi got out himself. He didn't bring an umbrella. He walked through the rain, his own impeccable suit darkening at the shoulders, and stopped in front of her. He just looked at her, his face a mask, but his eyes were a raw, open wound. Ella stood up, her legs shaking. She was done running. You killed him, she stated. It wasn't an accusation. It was the truth that hung in the air between them, heavy and sharp. Yes, Xiaomi said. His voice was raw. You're a monster, she whispered, repeating her words from the study. But this time it sounded like a question, a desperate plea for him to deny it. He took a step closer, the rain dripping from his hair. I am, he said, and the admission seemed to cost him everything. I am everything they whisper about in the dark. I am a man who destroys his enemies. I am a man who lives in the Gaidiye. He was inches from her now. He gently, almost reverently, reached out and brushed a piece of wet hair from her face, but his fingers were so warm. But you, he said, his voice dropping so low she could barely hear it over the rain, you are the first person who has ever made me wish I was not. You are the only thing in my life that isn't hodent. He didn't pull her in. He didn't command her. He just held his hand out, palm up in the pouring rain. A simple, profound offering. I can't promise you a simple life, Ella, he said, his voice breaking for the first time. I can't promise you that I am a good man. I'm not. But I can promise you this. You will never, ever be hunted again. You will never be cold. And no one, not even me, will ever hurt you. Come home. She looked at his hand, the hand that had ordered a man's death. And she looked at his eyes, the eyes that had seen her, truly seen her, when no one else would. She didn't take his hand. She lunged forward, burying her face in his chest, her arms wrapping around his waist as she sobbed. A sound of raw relief, of terror, and of a desperate, unexpected love. For a second, Zami froze, his entire body rigid. Then his arms came around her, crushing her to him, his face burying in her hair. He held her like a man drowning, and in the middle of the storm, in the arms of the most dangerous man in the city, Ella was finally, completely, and terrifyingly safe. He was her monster, and she was his one beautiful, messy miracle. They found each other in the most terrifying way, but it's a new beginning. What do you think is the difference between being owned and being protected? We'd love to read your take on their complicated new love story in the comments below.